Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
My guest, Graham Brady, is dressed smartly in a navy suit today. It is navy. But the 1922 committee, of which he is, of course, chair, is often referred to as the men in grey suits. You're in the wrong colour. They're a mysterious group of Tory backbench MPs with the power to tap the party leader on the shoulder and make them stand down. But is that fair? And exactly who and what is the 1922 committee? Here's Ellie.
The 1922 committee was set up in, 1923. In 1922, the Conservative leader Andrew Bonar-Law had pulled out of the coalition with the Liberals. What followed was an election and a number of new Tory MPs. It was started as a forum for them. But very quickly, all backbenchers were allowed to meetings, and by the end of the Second World War, it became the norm that Conservative leaders were, on occasion, invited along to give account of themselves. And that still happens today.
Its importance has grown very markedly over the years. Influencing policy, not of course making policy, but influencing policy through the representations that are made, either at meetings or to ministers and Prime Minister in other ways. This hugely important task of it's been entrusted to the 1922 committee since the 1960s of overseeing the election of the leader of the Conservative Party.
There voted 75 in favour of Mr Duncan Smith's leadership of the party. There voted 90 as not confident in his leadership.
Crucially, the 1922 committee has the power to force a vote of no confidence in a Conservative leader, and that's exactly what happened to Ian Duncan Smith in 2003.
The Parliamentary Party has spoken, the announcement has been made, and I will stand down as leader when a successor has finally been chosen.
Ladies and gentlemen, I have to announce that nominations for leader of the Conservative Party closed at 12 noon today. There was one valid nomination, that of the Right Honourable Michael Howard, Member of Parliament for Folkestone and Hythe.
Michael Howard led the party for just over 2 years. Although he never became Prime Minister, he says he always understood the need to have the 1922 committee on side.
Ultimate power resides with backbench members of Parliament of the governing party, really, certainly in the Conservative Party, because if you're only Prime Minister because you can command the confidence of the House of Commons. You're unlikely to command the confidence of the opposition parties in the House of Commons. So if you don't command the confidence of your own party, you don't command the confidence of the House of Commons. That's what parliamentary democracy is all about.
So Conservative leaders should learn to keep the 1922 committee sweet, something Margaret Thatcher lost sight of by the end of her leadership.
It has often been a force for stability within the Conservative Party, but there can be occasions, one thinks of the tremendous divisions over Europe in the 1990s under John Major, where the 1922 committee simply couldn't perform that very valuable role of bringing greater stability to the affairs of the Conservative Party in Parliament because the divisions were so great.
They used to call them the men in grey suits. The current chairman of the 22, here sporting dark blue, shows how things can change. But Theresa May knows she owes plenty to her backbenchers.
And the current chairman of the 1922 committee is still here. Graham Brady, Michael Howard said ultimate power resides with the party, and Theresa May had said that she would stay as long as the party still wanted her. How long would you like her to stay on as leader?
Well, I think Theresa did a good thing last week in making it clear that she's around for the long term, that she's not about to cuss and run. But of course it's true that it's always subject to the support of colleagues. There are essentially two ways any Prime Minister goes. One is their own party choosing to get rid of them. The other is the electorate choosing to get rid of them. Well,
so you're happy for her to go and lead you into the next election?
Absolutely. If my colleagues are, then I am.
Right. And are they at the moment?
Yes, absolutely. And at the moment we are solidly behind Theresa May. We know that she's got a very big job to deliver. There's a complicated set of things to make progress on, not just Brexit, but some of those other domestic challenges which are really important. We want her to make progress. We just had a general election. Now, we didn't get the result that we wanted, but we did win. And we did get a kind of share of the vote and a number of votes that, it has to be remembered, propelled Tony Blair to 2 landslide results.
But it was a disaster, Graham Brady. She lost the majority, didn't she? And she thought she was going to actually get a bigger majority. And she called a snap election when she had promised faithfully not to do that.
I think the election result was not what we would have wanted, and a lot of things went wrong in the campaign.
What did go wrong?
There's no doubt about that. Almost everything went wrong in the campaign, in my view, including, perhaps most significantly, I think the fact that it was all focused as a presidential-style campaign. That just didn't work for the style of Theresa May.
Right.
I think she was starting to get across to the public very well before that, as somebody who was starting to relax into the role, who is becoming more obviously in tune with people, more able to deal with people. But
she's the leader. She's the leader, and she makes the decisions in the end. One of the complaints from your colleagues was that she didn't communicate outside her coterie of just 2 advisers. How big a problem was that?
I think we've already seen some important changes in structure and in personnel. One of them, which is really important, is that she's brought in more people around her who are closer to parliamentary colleagues, who are good at dealing with colleagues.
And so are the channels of communication open now between yourselves?
Certainly, they were always open with me, but with far more colleagues, I think, now are a part of that process.
Oh, right. So you were always in contact with her, were you, ahead of the election?
Ahead of the election, or ahead of the campaign. Of course, things change in an election campaign. My position is predicated on me chairing the parliamentary colleagues, and when we get to an election campaign, Parliament isn't sitting, there are no members of Parliament.
Is the reason that you are so supportive of Theresa May because you are a Brexiteer and you think she's your best bet in terms of delivering the Brexit that you would like to see? And that's the case with the majority of your committee that is supposed to represent all Conservative backbenchers. It's people like you, Nigel Evans and Bernard Jenkins. What about those who aren't Brexiteers, who were Remainers and still are, unlike Theresa May, who was a Remainer and has changed her mind?
The 1920 Executive is a representative body. It has people representing all strands of opinion within the party. It almost invariably has had, in my experience in the 20 years I've been a Member of Parliament.
Sure, but now, does it represent Anna Soubry, Dominic Grieve, Nicky Morgan, who are sceptical about the government plans?
We have a full spectrum of opinion on the 1920 Executive, and I think that's a very good thing. It's important to us in doing our job, whether it be communicating with the leader of the party, whether it be dealing with the chief whip, the party chairman, the representative positions we have on the board of the party. We need to have that spectrum of opinion to make that work, and we have.
Right. I mean, is there a chance, though, that it looks to some MPs that you're representing the government to backbenchers rather than the other way around?
Well, that would, of course, be a very significant problem if that were to be the case. I don't think it is. I think probably I've been elected as chairman of the 22, which is an annual opportunity for election, for the last 7 years now, because people think that I'm prepared to tell it like it is and to stand up and be counted.
Many of your colleagues came on here to complain about ministers briefing against Theresa May as they saw it in terms of the leadership. How angry were you with those ministers, many of whom are still in post?
I think that we, as a committee, but I think this was generally the view of backbench colleagues, we were very keen that, having just come through the general election, we should be able to make progress in government, that the Prime Minister should be able to get on with the job, and it's really very important that we don't get bogged down with internal discussions and machinations. That's not what the country expects. They elect people to get on with the job, and having just come through a general election...
But she lost that majority. She didn't win the election in that strict sense of the word.
We won the election. We don't have the majority we would like to have.
Right, a minority, of course, and a deal done with the DUP for £1 billion. Were you happy with that deal?
I think there are responsibilities that fall to those who are in government to make sure that they can do the job, they can serve the national interest, and that is
were you happy with that deal?
And that is what we are seeking to do, and governing with the support of the DUP, or indeed, as you said earlier in your package, that there are 9 Labour MPs who voted in favour so far of the...
And you need them, don't you?
Of the
You're counting on those 9 Labour MPs.
European Union. Well, more would be very welcome.
Right. And the deal done with the DUP, was that something you would have advocated and supported?
I think having the security and the ability to predict what is going to happen in government is quite important, and having that arrangement, which of course doesn't deal with matters of controversial domestic legislation in Northern Ireland, is really very important for the good of the governance of our country.
And do you think it would also be good for the governance of the country, since that £1 billion was miraculously found in order to secure that deal with the DUP in Northern Ireland, that actually it is right now for Theresa May's government to advocate and suggest to the pay bodies that the 1% pay cap on the public sector should now be lifted?
I think these are things that need to be dealt with very carefully, very cautiously. And there's a
Why? Why cautiously? Do you support it or don't you? Should they lift the pay cap?
Because there is a tricky balance to be struck. And simply letting public sector pay take off without control doesn't do any favours.
Is anyone suggesting that it should be taken off?
I'm saying there's a balance to be struck. Doing that doesn't do any favours for lower paid people working in the public sector, because it has economic consequences which impact both on the tax revenues, impact on what people's mortgage rates might be, and so on. So it's right to be cautious. But it's also right that we don't seek to give people the impression that a decision that was taken in 2010 by the coalition government for very good reasons is going to be something which stays in perpetuity. There has to be a point where there is some flexibility in pay awards. So far, all of the recommendations of pay review bodies have been met in full, and I think they will continue to be.
But there is guidance, of course, from the Treasury. They only really recommend on the basis of what the Treasury suggests to them. And would that be good for nurses and for low-paid workers to now have a pay rise?
Of course, it's good for everybody to have a pay rise, and but as long as it doesn't prejudice the good, sound economic management of the country.
One of the things that has been dropped because of Theresa May's result in that general election is any expansion of grammar schools, something that you passionately have campaigned for. How upset were you about that?
Look, I'm a practical person, and I believe in pragmatism in politics. Of course, I think people should be free to have the kind of schools that they want to have, and that does include grammar schools. It's a shame if the parliamentary arithmetic makes that difficult. I think there are probably still things that could be done to help existing grammar schools, maybe to see some expansion as well, and I'm not going to give up on that.
Well, you're the person who says you're in regular contact with the Prime Minister.